I was a sophomore in college. It was 2015. That year, I was feeling a little bit alone. Like I had a roommate and I had a couple friends, but I just didn't feel like I was super close with everyone. That's a whole different story on why I felt that way. And so I don't know if you have ever heard of the app Yik Yak, which is like an anonymous, almost like an anonymous Twitter. So someone had also made a post on Yik Yak about wanting new friends, and so we had started talking. He went to school with me. We met up on the campus library, and we just started hanging out pretty much immediately. We had hung out just on campus and off campus a couple times. We would go for midnight steak and shake runs and things. But he had a crush on me, and I didn't like him. So one night we were at his house that he shared with his roommates. And since he shared with his roommates, we were watching a movie in his room. And I remember very specifically, it was like the Bo Burnham stand-up show. And he decided that he wanted to try and make a move. Instead of, holding my hand or kissing me or something, he took his pants off. And I remember trying to get up and move away, and he kept pulling me back down. And then he made me, I'll keep it PG, he made me do some things. And very quickly I realized that this was going downhill. And so in my head I was thinking about what could happen next or what I should do next. I was wondering, I was between him and the wall, so I was trying to think of how I could get up, how I could get out. I had pepper spray and a knife in my purse, and I was wondering, he lived off campus, about a half mile off campus, so I thought I would have to walk back to campus, and it was probably 11 o'clock at night. We're coming up on 5 years now. It was November 14th, 2015. So I really thought I was gonna have to walk back to campus in the freezing cold. But eventually he kind of realized that I wasn't into it, and I was able to move to the edge of the room, and I curled up into a ball. And I just didn't say anything. I didn't look at him. I just held my legs to my chest. And he finally realized, he was like, "Should I take you home now?" I was like, "That's a good idea." So we drove back to the campus in silence. And I just got out of his car, ran back up to my dorm, and I remember texting him saying, "That wasn't okay. You really hurt me. I think you know that we can't hang out anymore." And then my roommate and some of our friends across the hall had gone out for the night. So I remember calling them and just breaking down. I just fell to the floor of our dorm, and I just said, "Can you come home? I need you to come home." And then I spent probably about 2 weeks not really sure what to do. Because it didn't lead up to rape, I was worried that the campus police wouldn't take it seriously. There was no need to do a rape kit or anything like that. So it was really just my word against his. But I decided that what he did wasn't okay, and I wanted him to know that. And so I went to the Title IX coordinator at Ball State, and we had talked about it, and she said, "Okay, what do you want to do?" And I said, at first, I felt the need to protect him. I don't know why, but I said, "I don't want him to get in trouble, but I want him to know that that wasn't right." But she had said, "If you want, we can launch an investigation and there will be a hearing." And so I said, "Okay." So obviously they had to reach out to him to talk to him about what had happened. So the weekend after I had reported it, he started sending me message after message after message. And he was like, "Did you report me for something?" And I didn't respond. And he actually apologized. He said, "What I did was wrong. I'm sorry." And so I thought that saying, "I forgive you," would hopefully end the contact, but it didn't, and he kept messaging me to the point that I had to get a no contact order through the school. Then a couple of weeks went by, and we did a hearing. So it's a lot different than how they do it in a criminal setting. So they assemble a sexual misconduct board, and I think it was 4 people, and then it was the Title IX coordinator, and then the director of student rights and affairs. And they all listened to what I had to say, they listened to what he had to say, and they determined whether or not he was responsible, not actually guilty. So the day of the hearing was actually very nerve-wracking. At first I didn't want to tell my family, and I had gone to see a counselor on campus that had said, you can tell people as little or as much as you want to. So I had chosen not to tell anyone but my closest sister. I have 4 older sisters, so I told my closest sister. And so she came to the hearing with me. That day was a little weird. He wasn't paying attention to his emails or his calls or anything and didn't realize that the hearing was that day. So about 30 minutes before the hearing was set to begin, I had gotten a call from the director of Student Rights and Affairs saying, he's not here, he's wanting us to reschedule. But that was one saving grace in my experience, is that the administration was with me every step of the way. So the director of Student Rights said, absolutely not. I will not make her wait. She showed up, she did what she was supposed to do, that's on you. So he showed up. He brought an attorney with him, even though this wasn't a criminal case. Thankfully, they had us in separate areas. We were in the same building, but he was in the basement of the building and I was at the top floor of the building. So they asked me certain questions, and of course his attorney had asked me things like if I was drinking and what I was wearing, and not that any of that came into play. I know people will ask. I wasn't drinking. I wore combat boots, jeans, and then a Ball State hoodie. But they asked us all these different questions, and then we left. I actually saw him on the way out as we were leaving. His attorney grabbed him by the elbow and steered him away from me. After that, my roommates took me out for ice cream. So they were doing everything they could to keep me in a good state of mind. One of my roommates bought coloring books for us, and we just sat and we colored. And then probably about 2 hours later, I got a call saying that the board had found him responsible, and that meant that he was suspended for 2 years until I could graduate, and then they would see if he would be allowed back. He would have to take classes, he would have to write letters explaining what had happened and apologizing. Unfortunately for me, they kind of messed up. They used a term that technically could not be applied to my scenario. They used the term forcible sexual fondling. And the term force, he and his attorney argued, could not be applied to the situation because in Ball State's code it had to be violence or threat of violence, and that wasn't what had happened. So he had threatened to sue the school, and this process had gone on until spring break, and then I came back for the last bit of the semester, went home for the summer. Everything was good. I was very focused on healing, but he had threatened to sue the school. And so the day before classes started that next semester, I had gotten an email saying that he had threatened to sue, that they had messed up, and that he was coming back. So we did the whole thing over again. And actually that took us into the first year after the assault. The second hearing that I did was exactly 1 year after it had happened. And this time it got a little weird. He refused to answer any of the questions that they had. Because they had kept a recording of the original hearing. And he just said, I answered that the first time. I'm not going to explain myself again. So we left again. My roommates again were trying to do everything to keep me happy. And then a couple hours later, I got a call saying, yes, we found him responsible again. And it felt good, but I was still scared because we had done this twice now. And I'd heard stories about people doing it again and again and again. And so I went through the rest of that semester. And then the next semester, I went to the school's counseling agency and just said, this is what has happened. I am terrified I will be forced to do this again. So they called the director of Student Rights and Affairs. And he had told me, well, he couldn't outright tell me this because he wasn't positive this is what had happened. But when a student is suspended from school, their records are on hold. So they can try and transfer if they want, but wherever they try and transfer has to request those records, and those records will come back with a letter saying this is why you couldn't get them in the first place. So it was explained to me, or they alluded to the idea that he had threatened to sue so he could have his transcripts free, so he could transfer. So he didn't go to Ball State anymore, but he ended up going to another school and finishing at another school. So yeah, that's my story. Well, at first it was kind of good. I became determined. I was like, I'm not going to let this beat me. So the first semester after it had happened, I actually had really great grades. I made the dean's list. So at first, I really threw myself into my schoolwork. But then the second time around, I felt kind of hopeless. And so then I actually started failing out of school. So I started relying on my roommates, especially, and my family. I talked a lot with my professors, sometimes a little too late. Sometimes I would tell them at the end of the semester, like, hey, so about my grades. But I would talk, that was one thing. I value communication above most things, and so I would talk about it a lot. Part of the problem was that I felt sometimes like I was talking into a black hole, like I was just talking and everyone was hearing it but not really listening. So I made sure that I kept going to counseling. I tried to get into group counseling too. I considered getting a therapy dog for a while, although my parents were like, you don't need a pet. But I like to write. So before my current job, I worked at a newspaper, so I like to write. I kept a lot of notebooks, and this semester after it happened, I took a creative writing class, and I actually wrote about it a lot. It's never easy. It's never fun. I mean, I'm talking about it 5 years after, and I'm shaking. But there are so many people out there, more than anyone realizes. And I think that finding people who can be a sounding board for you and who can relate to you, and I mean, I'm not sure when you're going to air this, but anyone who wants to talk about it to me, I will gladly listen. This can happen to anyone at any point in time, no matter what they're doing. Someone could do everything right, and it would still happen. And I think a lot of people assume that it's like a stranger like rounding a corner preying on you. But I mean, statistics show that it is typically someone you know who's done it, and typically someone you know it's happened to. So I think just having those frank conversations and trying to put aside any preconceived notions that you have about it can make a world of difference for someone. We need people to speak up in any way that you can. Even if this hasn't happened to you, just say, like, put that invitation out there. I will listen to you. I will help you if you want. Even before this, I was telling a friend that I was going to do this, and she was like, you were so brave. I couldn't do it because it had happened to her too. And so I said, well, if you ever want to go through this process, I will be right there with you. Because we could all use someone just there to physically or metaphorically hold our hand through this. Because it's hard, and it hurts, and it's scary.